But today, I'm going to talk about what telework is, talking about the aim and objective of my entire research, talking about the domains, literature, and the interviews and simulations we did, analysis that we did, and how we answered the final question of does telework reduce emissions or not. But before that, some history lesson for us first. Starting in 20th century, the word telework or telecommute was coined, and it started with a limited number of 5 employees and then was extended to a full-blown thing with more than 2,000 people. All the way fast forward to a little bit before COVID, the telework rate of Canadian society was increasing, and then once COVID happened, a lot of people were teleworking. And all the way to the moment, Canadians are the nation with the highest interest in teleworking. So we in Canada, we love teleworking, and that's why it's important. Even if you go back to normal, there's probably a lot of people staying around, and you know that a lot of office spaces are, for example, being split into 2, and one office building that used to belong to one company is now belonging to 2 companies because they're renting it out to make extra money because they are offering hybrid work models, right? So what is teleworking? Teleworking is technically working fully or partially outside any traditional office through internet or ICT, and that is what the simple definition of telework would be. But the main question for my research was, what is really impacted by teleworking in terms of energy use and emissions? And the photos in the background, they are not just random, they are me teleworking from Old Chelsea, having pizza and coffee. In terms of energy use and emissions, we have offices, homes, transportation, and the internet that all impact energy use and emissions associated with teleworking. And those are like the main 4 domains that we focused on. There's definitely other factors to it, such as productivity and other things. But what is complicated about telework, right? What is it that is important about telework? Because if you're technically not commuting on the roads anymore, you're going to save energy, right? But to understand the complexities here is we have a best case scenario, a moderate case scenario, and a worst case scenario. Assume that you have a painter that no longer needs an office in the downtown area, moves to a small home because she is a sustainable person, loves to walk around or bike around somewhere in Westboro where everything is accessible, yoga classes, gym, grocery shopping, and you really uses the Wi-Fi or the internet to a minimal degree, right? And then you have the moderate case, which is the office employee. I'll come back to this one, but let's talk about the worst case scenario. A manager who is granted the privilege of working fully remote moves to a very big home, for example, in Old Chelsea, a mansion or something, and at the same time maintains a big office building because he still needs to greet and meet people, relies on luxury cars or big SUVs because now he has to commute from Old Chelsea all the way to downtown, and with the snow situation we have to need big cars, and has to do a lot of meetings and, for example, VPNs to secure connection, upload files, talk to people. The first one is obviously reducing emissions. The second one is obviously, not obviously, but like it's anecdotally understandable that they're going to put more emissions out. Then we have the moderate case, where is most of the people fall in this category, and that is where you have an office, either a hot desking or dedicated office. You have a home, you might decide to get a bigger home or a smaller home, really depending on you. You have the car, depending on what you decide, you might stay within the vicinity of your office, or you might move farther. And because now you're working in a hybrid work model, you're using the Wi-Fi more. So there's still an office associated with you. You have the internet, and the home and car, it's really up to you what you do with them. But then the real question for us is, in that scenario, how are they going to impact each other? Which one is going to offset potential savings from the other one? Is one putting more emissions out there compared to the other ones, or not really? And that was what we were trying to answer through my entire thesis. And this is what we did. The aim of the study was to quantify the impact of telework on energy use and emissions in these 4 domains that we talked about. And we had a survey and interviews, simulation, and then integrated phase, which where we were considering the survey results to inform simulations to run analysis and calculate emissions associated with telework. We are focusing on scope 1 and scope 3 emissions mostly. And the next one which we are going to cover today, is what are the factors impacting telework domain, right? And as all of you have done it before, is conducting a literature review. So what we did, we conducted a literature review with a lot of different keywords. And what we're trying to really understand is what are the effects of telework in each domain, what is the interrelationship between different effects in one domain, and what is the interrelationships between those effects in different domains, right? And at the end, we were labeling them as a cause and effect, one causing the other one, or it's just a simple relationship where both exist at the same time. This is what we came up with, more than 50 effects or items that were mapped out, what is impacting what. For example, parking is impacting car use is impacting your distance to work, and all those things that might be impacting each other. But that was from literature, and literature might have not all the things that we need, right? So what we did is there possible that something is missing or is hiding from us? And what we did, we started an interview study. We interviewed people who started teleworking, and this was around 2021, that it was still the height of like COVID-19 pandemic, everyone was working from home. And what we did is we interviewed people. We had a criteria that people had to move away because that was something that was really missing from literature. We wanted to see what's happening with these people. We asked them about these 4 domains and what happened to them. And we also had an extra question about their social life, what they prefer, do they want to change career if they are like remote working, will they keep it or not, but that is not within the current scope. And what we did in the final results, we did some thematic analysis to understand what's going on, what are the effects, what's going to be impacting these 4 domains. We're almost ready to deploy the main survey that we had, but we have not talked about buildings yet. To understand the building, we did some simulations of home and offices. We had an archetype medium office building. We modeled different technologies in there, such as demand control ventilation, economizer, and all those things to see how these technologies can save energy for partial occupancy in office buildings. And for homes, we designed 4 different home models that were with teleworker and without teleworker to quantify their energy use and emissions. And we put all those together to see what is the balance between energy use and emissions in homes. These are some of those technologies that we went through in the office building. This is a photo of the office building. The technologies were saving anywhere from almost 1% to 2%, all the way to 42%, depending on the strategy that you use. And this is another representation of potential technologies. The simulation results, home simulations, which is the 4 types. We had the small rises like the houses, and we had the bigger one all the way to low-rise apartments. The results of home emissions, which I can go through, but I prefer to show you this office occupancy and home occupancy, which is the combine of all those together. If you want me to go through those individual ones, let me know. I can go into details as much as you want, but I'm just trying to keep things simple here. For homes and offices, as you can see, from 0% teleworking all the way to 100% teleworking, the energy use and emissions are being impacted significantly, right? You can see that the numbers are going up when people are working from home, which might not really make sense, right? But we're in a second going to understand why that is happening. The reason those numbers are going up and becoming more and more orange on those graphs is homes gain a 250 leverage, right? You have a situation where you're dealing not only with the emissions and energy use in offices, you're dealing with a situation that a simple office building is associated with 250 people, right? So to capture scope 1 and scope 3 emissions, you need to consider those 250 homes. And when you do that, with increased occupancy times, those overall energy use and emissions go up. So far, we have the domains, the relationships, we have information that we needed from teleworkers to make sure that we're not going to miss anything when we're doing these simulations. The total emissions of home and offices, we have an understanding based on some of the survey results and information that we got. And we were ready to deploy our biggest survey with the federal government. The main areas that we covered was demographic question, as we normally cover them in any survey. Information regarding the transportation, commute, one-way distance, and all those things, seasonal changes in transportation, Then questions about their home types, sizes, so that we can assign them to one of those simulation models. Thermostat set points, which is very important, and average time spent on video calls or audio calls. What we did, we worked in 2 regions with the federal government, the National Capital Region in Quebec, with these 3 different departments, TBS, CRA, and PSPC. Initially, we had more than 5,650 participants who responded to the survey, but we had a high attrition rate, which potentially reduced up to 1,500. And the reason for that was we were applying very strict inclusion and exclusion criteria to make sure that we captured everything that we need. That included the transportation diaries. This is an overview of simulation and scenarios that we're going to cover and do the integrated analysis on. We have the transportation parts, internet, home, and office. And we start with, we're going to look at something like this. We wanted values for every day so that we can calculate things for the entire year based on the average results that we receive from those people. For travel diaries, we ask people to input their information in a 1-day travel diary sample for a telework day, in a remote work day, and 1 in-person day. And what we did, we asked them about their transportation type, average kilometer that they traveled. We created those averages from, we asked them for their trips, and then we calculated the averages per trips after we received all the transportation diaries. We applied, for example, we asked them about seasonal changes, included that in our analysis, and at the end we came up with an average emission per employee per day. And this emission was calculated based on each individual entry. It was not like we calculated an average car emission and then applied that to all people. We calculated the average car emissions from each participant's car emission rate, right? We had a tool from government called FCL, so we included all their database and matched these things with those. For home emissions, we asked them about their home type. We ran some of our home simulations to make sure that everything is matching, for example, the thermostat values that they input in there. And then we assigned participants based on what they declared for their home sizes and types to one of our 4 simulation models. For the internet, we calculated the hours spent on the tools, the data use that they had, and then we calculated the emissions per kilowatt hour per gigabyte. And that's how we came up with the average emission for employees. And then we have the office emissions, which we had the office simulation model, but unfortunately government was able to provide us with their actual emission data and their plans for reducing those. So we included those from the government data or their plans in our study. And this is what we came up with, all the final values for different 4 domains that were used to calculate our annual emission data. As you can see, the fully in-person compared to the telework, if you look at the total, it's going down, and then when you look at the remote workers, it's very down, except this one. The reason for that is in our statistical samples that we collected, we separated the hybrid workers and in-person workers to one group and remote workers into another group. We asked government some questions about the differences, cross-reference things with government, with the correspondence that we had, and we confirmed the things that we were finding, and eventually we did this, which shows remote workers were putting very less emissions out there. I can go through why that is happening, but that's the reason. But overall, you can see that telework and working fully remote reduces emissions if we are just considering emissions in both areas, National Capital Region and Quebec. Sorry. One of the main findings, which is also confirmed by many previous studies, is that transportation is one of those areas that saves the most energy. The reason of the difference between these 2 graphs is that the homes in Quebec are way cleaner than homes in Ontario because they have electricity grid, we have a natural gas situation here. And that is where the drum rolls come in. That does telework reduce emissions? And the answer is yes, but it really depends on things that you do, right? We have some limitations. The major one is the confidentiality that we had in data collection, so we couldn't, for example, associate income level of those employees with the situation that they have, right? So that was one of the things that we had. But there's so many other options here that I can go through, such as the offices are really important and divestment plans are important for offices, what they're going to do with it, if they're going to keep hybrid work models around. We had a limited sample size for people who were working in person because the time we have been doing this, almost everybody was having a telework situation. Nobody was working fully in person. And then we have a lot of other things, for example, the constant emissions that we use instead of the dynamic one. You know that the grid is not having a constant emission after, right? It changes. With some feature studies, need to focus on longer periods. We did a 1 day single transportation diary, which does not capture the full scope of the changes. The demographic questions on income levels, and also even the region itself, right? You know that in North America we are very car dependent versus, for example, someone like Netherlands, where they are really sustainable, biking around, walking to places, right? But the main takeaway of today is that telework is more sustainable compared to a traditional work model, as long as we develop sustainable behaviors and preferences, right? If your income level now after teleworking allows you to buy a new built home, which is 1 hour away from Ottawa, then is the question, are you going to be commuting every day to downtown Ottawa for like 45 minutes? If you are going to do that, you need a bigger car. You might get, I don't know, a Hummer, for example, to just navigate the snowy landscape, and that's going to put more emissions out there, right? And some people do that. Some people, for example, commute all the way from, I forgot, Kempfield, all the way to Ottawa, and they are okay with like commuting 45 minutes. So it's really up to people's preferences, but the main takeaway is that this telework is sustainable as long as we also develop the sustainable behaviors. Those are the publications that we published, the media coverages that we received. That is also from Ottawa. And with that, I want to say, let's redefine the alternatives for a better one. That is the main thing, but before I come to the final thing, I have a ask from you. If you're interested in writing magazine articles, please feel free to send me an email and then just express your interest. Be like, I'm interested in writing magazine articles on subjects that you are interested in. And that is something that I can share more information with you. But with that, thank you so much for talking to me, for being here, and I really appreciate it. That's it. Questions? Yeah.
I have a quick one. I liked the map you did with all the factors and the relationships put us into the beginning. What software did you use to develop that?
Sorry, there's so many different softwares.
Yeah. Beautiful
Which one
science,
is
by
it?
the way.
Thank you so much. Closer to the beginning?
Yeah, even more.
So we're talking about one of the graphs?
It's kind of like a flow chart.
It's the literature review, right? So, the literature review?
I'm not sure if it was a literature review before that. Wait, sorry. Yeah. How like all like the dashed lines on it? Like,
Oh, that's Visio.
variables? Visio?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
this is
the one.
Visio. And it was a pain. I was thinking of between using Illustrator or Visio.
So
Both of
don't-
them were painful,
Oh.
but Visio is less painful than Illustrator. Because every time you change this, I mean, it's supposed to be useful for you, but every time you change these like arrows, the entire thing might mess up.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So that is the thing.
So did you consider any differences when the homes, for example, are occupied or not occupied? For example, my home now is empty. I'm on campus. In your simulations, did you assume that everything at home is definitely like maybe some equipment, some devices will not be running or not be cooking, but for example, set points, heating devices, did you consider any difference?
Yeah, that's actually one of the next lines of inquiry for this research. What we did is that we had like both occupancies, one home with teleworker, one home without teleworker, assuming all those like thermostat set points and everything in them. And homes with teleworker consume more energy, and they also put more emissions out there because of more occupied hours and those thermostats and other things that are involved. But yeah, we need that. But then, to what extent are we creating those averages? How's like behavioral changes going to be? We didn't really go deep into that, except like what we had in the middle.
There's a question online from Brody. Do you have the sound up on your laptop?
Do I have the slide?
Sound up on your laptop.
Sailing, can you hear me if I?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with the part of it. I just want to kind of question that's kind of generic, I guess, but it's related to, I guess, the interface between my work and your work. Is, we're saying teleworking potentially can save energy, which is essentially I generally agree with, but I guess that's kind of the caveat of if you're fully remote or if you're a hybrid worker, because like for me, and if I'm working hybrid, and my office is still operating heating, like my heat operating right? So would you say that maybe there are some other things that need to be considered, I guess, on the commercial space utilization side to actually realize some of these things?
100%. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Like, if I'm pretty sure you, I don't know if you guys have access to, but you should have. But the government now has this like satellite clusters where you can go and work from them. So I'm not sure where the federal government is planning, but from as far as we learned from our conversation with them is that they are divesting some parts of their portfolio, and they're moving toward those like clusters or satellite offices that people can work from. So definitely the commercial space is an important part of it. And there's also an increasing trend of those who used to have big office buildings, now they are trying to create some like panels or spaces so that they can rent part of their offices to other businesses, right? So there's definitely a growing trend of that, and I think federal government is also trying to catch up with that trend, but it's definitely a slower. But for sure, for now, if you're just talking about the current situation, even during COVID, a lot of people still had a dedicated office, right, and it was running while they were just working from home. But that's for sure. But the trend I think is going, and people are trying to catch up with it.
Obviously, this is not my first time listening to this
Sorry.
presentation, but what I'm just curious about is, what's your recommendation? How do you operationalize this finding? Like, do you see